For the rending of your clothing.
Yeah. Right.
As you will.
I think so.
We're already out tempting to hit.
Hopefully.
You okay?
Yeah, I just came from work. It's close to my work.
No, it would be an honor.
So Dave. I can send it back. I don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty hard.
No.
Glenn, do you want to see the shade?
Yeah, just
Maybe. All right. Just wanted to make sure. We're supposed to make sure.
Watch your footing as you come out. Ladies and gentlemen, if we can remind everyone to please turn off your cell phones for the service.
Lift my eyes to the mountain. From where shall my help come? My help shall come from Adonai, maker of heaven and of earth. Esaenai el Eharim. Me'ayin yavo Esri. Esri. Elohim Adonai. Oshe Shamayim. We are gathered together to remember Alan Stitelman. Kvod Harav, Rabbi Liban, thank you so much for being here. For those who are on the live stream, to you, dear Yael and Naomi in Israel, to you, dear brother Paul, we join you and know that we're thinking about you at this time of remembrance, as well as other family and friends who are joining us on the live stream. To the family who is gathered here, gravesite today, we send all of our love and thoughts and prayers. And we thank you for creating this Kehila Kadosha, this holy congregation and community. At this time, it's my honor to call forward Rabbi Liban to share with us Psalm 23.
Nafshi shoyve yancheni v'magnit tzedek l'man shemoy. Kam ki elech b'geitz amovdes lo yivado ki ata imadi. Shivtecha mishantecha heiman yanachamoni. Saroy prefonai shulchan et tzereroi. Bishanta v'shem enoshi kaisir v'yo. Chesed yedefuni kol yimei chayoi. Vishavti v'reis Adonai v'yarech yami. Orla David, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. Guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. You are with me. Rod and your staff, they comfort me. Anointed my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord.
We want to thank you, Rabbi Liban, not only for sharing with us those words of comfort and uplift, but also knowing how you help support the family and Yoey for so many years. We're so grateful. And it's very appropriate that we think about and remember Yoey at this time. His presence is certainly felt. Ecclesiastes chapter 27. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what has been planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we will remember Alan. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we will remember him. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we will remember him. We will remember him. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember him. When we are lost and sick at heart, we will remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember him. So long as we live, so too shall he live, for he is now a part of us as we remember him. We now turn to words of tribute and honor, to eulogies that are going to be shared from this podium, but also reflect loved ones in Israel, loved ones back east. It's my honor, and in this order, please, to first call Ori, Alan's son. Then Meg Ryan will be sharing Yael's eulogy. Then David will be sharing his words together with Paul, Alan's brother. And then finally, Ori. So Ori, if you could please come forward. We thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today to honor the memory of my father, Alan David Stitelman. I want to share something about my dad that has always stayed with me. He lived his life without judgment of others. He never looked at people through a lens of criticism or dismissal. He simply accepted them as they were. I remember one vacation as a young child when someone came up asking him for money. Instead of brushing the man off or just handing him a few dollars, my dad invited him into a bar and bought him a drink. At that time, I thought this was an unusual thing to do. But as the years have gone on, I realized it was such a powerful lesson. It showed me that living without judgment, with openness, can change the way you see people and the way people see you. That spirit carried through in his last years at the assisted living facility. He easily made friends because he never put up walls. He went out of his way to know everyone's name and to make newcomers feel welcome. He was proud of that. He recounted stories about how people would be sitting alone and how he incorporated them into his friend group who played Rummy Cube daily. I observed him telling a 90-plus-year-old woman who was hard of hearing the same thing over and over and over again, just to ensure she could be part of the conversation. And she had a huge smile on her face once she got what everyone else was laughing about. It gave him joy to feel connected and to help others feel like they belong. I'll never forget when he returned from the rehabilitation center after his surgery for a few months ago. I dropped him off, and while I went to park the car, he had already scooted himself straight into the dining room to join 3 friends he always had lunch with. When I walked inside, I could hear people from across the dining area calling out, "Welcome back, Alan." It struck me how deeply he was woven into that community. My dad's way of living without judgment taught me something important. Kindness and acceptance build real community. It's a lesson he lived every day and one I will carry with me always.
Thank you so much, Ori. Please.
From you, Al. I first want to thank Meg for reading my eulogy today, as I cannot be there. I also want to thank David, who I would also like to thank Dave for holding his phone for 2 hours so I could sit with my dad as he took his final breaths and was able to peacefully pass from this world. His last breaths taken, as both Dave and I asked him to say hello to Yowie for us and send our love. My father was a man who was often misunderstood, overlooked, and yet if you actually sat down with him and had conversations, he was intelligent, shy, and deeply caring. I feel that even though I had 45 years of being his daughter, I only truly met my dad when I was 25, when my Yowie also met my dad. It was the birth of all of his grandchildren, Ellie, Yowie, Maddie, Naomi, and Sammy, that brought out a less shy and guarded man than the one I knew as a child and young adult. His presence as a grandfather to my children was what brought us closer together. With Yowie's illness and then the birth of Naomi, my father often helped me on a daily basis. He always came in and said, "How's my Yo?" when he saw Yowie, and always gave a wonderful hug to little Naomi as she danced her way into his arms. He would go with me to doctor's appointments, both mine and Yowie's, and sit with both Naomi and Yowie reading to them, playing with them, and just talking to them. My dad spent a lot of hours at the Science Museum, playing with Yowie and Naomi a lot in the outer space section and at the zoo, pushing them in their little car, strollers, or the carts as they enjoyed talking about their favorite animals. As the children got older, I began to know my father even more, engaging with him as an adult and seeing the beauty in those moments. I feel blessed that in my last months in the United States before moving to Israel, I had the ability to be in Orlando and spend evenings cooking for and eating with my father. We played Rummy Cube. He was an avid player with all of his friends at the assisted living facility. And we would talk and reminisce about all of his grandchildren and about his life, as well as his hopes for his family's future. One of my favorite stories he told me is of him as a child, joyfully thinking that all of Washington, D.C. was celebrating his 4th birthday because of the parades that were being held on August 14, 1945, for the victory over Japan and the end of World War II. He saw joy in these moments as a child. Unfortunately, for many years of his life, he didn't know how to grab joy with 2 arms like he did when he was that little boy. Fortunately, in 2020, after skirting death from COVID, my father landed in his final home, Inspired Living. He found friends, immense joy, and kinship with the people who truly saw him. I'm grateful he had 5 years in a place he was seen and loved. It brings me joy that every time I stepped into that building, I heard how wonderful he was and how loved he was. One of his greatest joys as an adult was becoming the ambassador of the assisted living home and helping new residents integrate. Sometimes he overstepped his boundaries by advocating with the staff for better care for his friends, but that was what made him wonderful. I will miss my father, his chuckles, his "oh nuts" comments, his oafish desire to love and be loved, and his unconditional love for me. Daddy, rest and be free. I love you.
Greg, we're so grateful for being Yael Shlicha, her emissary here today. Read those words so beautifully, and to you, Yael, thank you so much for honoring your father. David, if you could please.
So first, I'd like to share some words from Paul, Alan's brother. Alan David Stitelman was my brother. We shared a life and a multitude of experiences and memories. How does one sum this up? I cannot catalog praises, that would be dishonest. My brother was human, he was flawed. My brother was clumsy, he was physically clumsy, and clumsy in his interactions, which never came easy for him. However, in the end, if we are to get a true sense of a person, we must account for their intentions. My dear niece once said to me that she knew her father's good heart. That is so. He knew he was a large person. As a youth, he practiced weightlifting and became very strong. There were many who were intimidated by this, but I knew that he wanted to use his strength to protect and not to harm. He had difficulty expressing, but he could see. He once told me that he knew how much I struggled, and he never wanted his children or grandchildren to struggle. And so he was accepting. He wanted his loved ones to know happiness and was frustrated that he couldn't bring this about. My brother did not spend his life in bitterness or reclamation. He, many times, expressed thankfulness for what he had. When he lost his beloved grandchild, he wept. I had never seen him weep before that. He was frustrated he was powerless to ease his grandchild's pain. However, in his grandchildren, he found a level of love and acceptance he had never known before, and he loved them in equal measures. And that, I think, was the greatest blessing of his life. Now he is gone, and he lives in our minds and in our hearts. May his memory be for a blessing. And for me, I want to thank you, Paul, for sharing your reminiscences of Alan. I want to highlight talking with Paul was one of the last conversations that Alan had, and it was really touching. Alan had a huge smile on his face when he realized that it was Paul he was talking to. He had a lot of love for his brother. I'd also like to share a few things about Alan, some of the things that I think people here saw, and a lot that sort of happened towards the end of his life that may surprise people. Alan's first surprise for me was just over 20 years ago, was how incredible of a grandfather he was. Nothing I ever saw delighted him more than talking to them and seeing the grandchildren. As a retiree, Alan had infinite patience and incredible love. He could listen to Yoav and Naomi talk about video games forever, far longer than I could, and I at least like video games. Alan had absolutely no idea what Yoav and Naomi were talking about as they rambled on about Pokemon and Yokai Watch, but he was interested to see them happy talking to him about something that they cared about. As a grandfather, I can't really recall Alan explicitly teaching the grandkids. He definitely wasn't a lecturer or a let me tell you something I find interesting, and I think that's a shame. But I think he did occasionally sneak in lessons with his cheerful kind of oafish humility. One that sticks out for me was hearing him, and he repeated this at multiple ages for the grandkids, tell both Yoe and Naomi about how he was one of the only white children to attend school after Montgomery County, Maryland desegregated, because he didn't see the fuss and he had to go to school, always with a grin and a papa self-chuckle. I don't know if as a child it was really he just had to go to school like he claimed. I look back and they desegregated it in 1955, so he was 14, probably old enough to have noticed and had some sense of what's going on. But more importantly, as an adult, he recognized he was proud to teach his grandchildren about doing the right thing, even when it's tough. I'm not sure if there's as much of a lesson in one of his other favorite stories, which was how when he was on duty with the Coast Guard at Cape Canaveral, he got a ride and then threw up in John Glenn's car. Alan was surprisingly academic, which I think not many of us saw. And it's definitely not most of us in 2006. The basement was full of shelves of books. I assume they were Yael's. There was lots of early Jewish history, endless Holocaust books and movies, and pretty weighty Jewish Christian polemic. They were all his. He was even more into genealogy. He continually researched and collected family history. He was perfectly capable and very happy to discuss 1800s local Polish politics, often on a first name basis with the participants, and he was kind of confused and surprised when nobody else had the same context. But the strongest surprise was in the final chapter of his life. At Inspired Living in Florida, he was a totally different person. He had really drawn into himself the last few years here at Xanadu in Denver. But Inspired, he was known and beloved by everyone, staff and residents. He was memorable too. During his last night in hospice, the nursing assistant walked in and did a double take and said, "Wait, I know him." And we figured out that she'd worked at Inspired 3 years before and still remembered Alan, not just as a face, but remembered his personality and was able to share really touching stories. So why was Alan memorable? It's because he talked to everybody. And he often put himself into positions to do so. He was the official ambassador, as Meg said on Elle's behalf, to new residents. And he rapidly made new friends. They would fight over sitting next to him at meals. And his sense of justice led him to be more than a little feisty to protect other residents. He'd be protesting that they weren't taking care of his friends' food needs. The same day he'd be meeting with prospective residents to tell them how wonderful Inspired Living was. He was surprisingly independent too. Even though he had access to a pretty good all-day kitchen, he took pleasure in going to the stores to shop for his preferences and always had a fully stocked fridge with his favorites. His independence combined with his famous hypochondria. No matter how many times Elle, me, or Inspired raided his room, he always somehow managed to acquire more contraband over-the-counter meds. I found half a dozen stashes this week while cleaning out his studio. Not quite the 3 contractor bags I once hauled out of his room, but he did a really good job of hiding these. And finally, his independence combined with his, and this isn't going to be a surprise to anybody, his stubbornness. His health decline this summer had a lot to do with his falls. He insisted all the way to the very end on being the master of his own mobility. Alan really didn't need a lot to be happy. It really came down to family, especially the grandkids, friends, Rummikub, a printer with a low cost per page, and something yummy, steak, hamburger, ice cream, or fruit cups, and a comfy chair. I'm really glad I got to see Alan bloom in his final years, but even more for the joy that I got to see him bring to Yoi and Naomi. Naomi is too devastated to directly share her feelings about Papa, but her favorite day of the week and Yoi's was Papa Thursdays, when she'd meet up for Papa, almost always for fast food. His unconditional love and attention were exactly what Naomi needed, what her soul needed. And while I'm devastated she no longer has that solid emotional platform, I'm very glad that she has 16 years of fantastic Papa memories. And I hope that my future grandkids love me as much as Yodi and Naomi love Papa.
Thank you so much, David, for sharing your meaningful words and reflections. We also thank you for sharing, Paul, your reflections about your brother. We greatly appreciate it. At this time, it's my honor to call forward Noreen. Following Noreen's reflections, we will be lowering the casket. Once the casket is lowered, the immediate family first will be invited forward to participate in the mitzvah of burial. And then the remaining family and friends who are gathered, we invite you forward to also participate in the mitzvah of Alan's burial. So that's what we'll be doing following Noreen's words. Thank you.
Sorry for the pause. I'm here just in recent years with our kids' activities in Florida, but he was a very big part of my life for many reasons. He was the grandfather of my children. He was the father of my husband. He was my father-in-law, and he was the best friend of my parents. I came to this family not raised Jewish. I converted, and when I first met Alan and Tommy, he made me a huge part of the family. He welcomed me. He just instantly made me one of his daughters. like everyone said, there are some surprises to him that I would find out, these little nuggets over the years. I remember we moved to the shore, we got a house at the shore, and he said, "Oh, I used to live there. I worked in Cape May. And I remember being out on the boat in the middle of these storms, just rowing. And I'm like, where did that come from?" And he just always had a lesson, like where he said he never judged. He was very simple, but he was beautiful in his simplicity. And with that, I guess I should mention before I read this, my mother passed away almost 20 years ago, and she and Alan spoke on the phone almost every day. Their longest conversation was 4 hours. He was talking to her more than I was talking to her, which I'm sad for, but I'm glad they got to share stories. And when my mom passed, my father became very friendly with him, and they would talk once a week, once every 2 weeks. My family is Irish Catholic, and my father said he felt closer to this family than he did to his sisters-in-laws who are also Irish Catholic. And I think it has a lot to do with Tommy, but with Alan, I think he brought the families together, and there's no greater gift than that. So I just want to read what my dad had to say. My dad's 84 years old, so it's not as beautiful and eloquent as everybody else's. Alan was a fellow grandfather and a friend. I'm scrolling down, sorry. Over the years, Alan and I talked several times a year. We talked first about children and grandchildren. Alan was always interested in how they were doing. He was so proud of them. I remember 2 incidents which occurred when we were together in person. One was when my Labrador Retriever dog, Bob, was in New York for Thanksgiving. Bob didn't do stairs. We lived on the 3rd floor. So Bob wouldn't climb the stairs. And what Alan did was he went down at the bottom of the stairs and he pushed him up about 30 flights of stairs, and Bob didn't go down for another 3 days. But that was Alan. This is the person my dad, by the way. So I carried him up the stairs with no difficulty. The other was when we were walking on a path in the woods in Boston with Bob again, when Ellie was a baby, and another dog attacked Bob. Didn't have the heart to say that was my dog, but attacked Bob. It was a vicious dog fight, and Alan just stepped in. He just walked right in and he broke up the fight without injury and just kept walking right afterwards. I remember that story too. My dad said, I called Alan last week on one of our usual calls, only to learn from Ori of his worsened condition. I won't say I'll say what my dad didn't say, but Alan was one of his best friends. And all I can say is, Alan, I love you to bits.
Maureen, we thank you for those beautiful words that you shared, and also on behalf of your father, we really appreciate it. Thank you. שלא ייגמר לעולם. החול והים, רשרוש של המים, ורק השמיים, תפילת האדם. החול והים, רשרוש של המים, ורק השמיים, תפילה. Come forward. Traditionally, 3 shovels. Also tradition to place the shovel back in the dirt for the next person. participated in this far. We can have a few go around to this side too, please. Thank you. Forward participated.
Yes. Under circumstances next.
Thank you.
Please regather with Rabbi Liban to lead us in the Omelay Rock prayer. Everyone could please. Let's reconvene and gather.
Mole Rachamim, Sheikhein Vamroimim, Am Seim Nechad Nechayna, Tachas Kanfei HaShechina, In Kedoshim Utaharim, Kezor HaRakia Masirim, Es Nishmas Allah in David, Ben Yosef Echaya Shalach Loilamai Bal Rachamim Yasireu V'Seiser Ganafav Loilamim Yitzror V'Yitzraya Chayim Es Nishmasai Adonai Ron Achalasai Yanuach V'Shalayim Al Nishkavai Doimar Amen. O compassionate God, eternal spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence for Alan, Alon David Ben, Yosef Achaya, who has entered his eternal afterlife. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, the shadow of your wings, bonds of eternal life. God is his inheritance. May rest in peace, and let us all say together now, Amen.
Kavod Rav, we really appreciate your honoring. Thank you. We now turn to the mourner's Kaddish. Ask the immediate family at this time, as well as others, to please rise to lead us. May the source of peace and comfort to all who mourn, and compassion and strength to all who are bereaved. And let's say, Just a moment, I'm gonna ask everyone to please form what are called the shurot, the lines of condolence. If you could please do that. I'll momentarily ask you to do so, facing in this direction from the canopy towards the street. Couple of announcements. First of all, Yael is inviting everyone to her virtual Shiva. The sheets that were on the lectern have additional information, or you can just contact Yael and she'll give you the Zoom link. So she invites you for her virtual Shiva that she'll be observing over the next couple of days after Shabbat's over. And I know it'll be a great comfort and strength to her and to Naomi. Also, Tommy very kindly is inviting everyone back to her home for a meal of comfort and consolation. So please know that Tommy warmly is inviting all of you. And then finally to you, Tommy, to you, David, Yael, Naomi, to you, Ori, Noreen, Maddie, Ellie, and Sammy. We send all of our love and thoughts and prayers together with you, Paul, across the miles. May you know comfort, may you know strength and comfort. So other than the immediate family, if the other loved ones, family and friends could form two shurot, two lines, extending again from the canopy, please, towards the pavement. And we share with them as they go through, whether in Hebrew or in English, may you be comforted together with all of the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. Thank you so much for your presence here today. Really appreciate it.
Sharet.